We saw in the last video the impact minimum wage would have on the no-skilled labor market. So why are so many people an advocate of it? Because the negative effect that it has on some markets isn't as great as it is on other markets. And here's the way we can think about it. Okay, assume that we have the no skilled labor market in at a Burger King, okay, in Beverly Hills, California. So this is Beverly Hills Burger King, okay, and there's going to be a supply and demand of labor we'll get to in a minute, and we have a market for no skilled labor in well um, where say in Greensboro, North Carolina. Let's just say Greensboro, North Carolina. Okay. And we're looking at a Burger King in Greensboro. Okay. Now, question is, obviously, these two markets are different because I just drew two different graphs. If they were the same, there wouldn't have been any reason to draw two different graphs. So how are they different? Well, let's think of it like this. With regard to labor supply, let me change these to W, of course. With regard to labor supply, we need to look at the demographic of the typical worker at the Beverly Hills Burger King and the Greensboro, North Carolina Burger King, okay? What's a typical worker at the Greensboro, North Carolina Burger King look like? Well, probably come from a low-income household, probably maybe working not only the Burger King job but another job, probably using the income from that job to actually support their family. Okay, and what does that mean? Well, that means that if they ever took a cut in pay, they would be very sensitive to that. In fact, they would probably quit and go work somewhere else because their family depends on that income. If they took a cut in pay at this Burger King, it would hurt their finances at home substantially. On the flip side, they got an increase in pay, they would probably respond to that in applying far more effort to their job activity. Okay, in other words, they would be highly sensitive to a change in the wage rate at the Burger King in Greensboro, North Carolina. In other words, their labor supply curve would probably be fairly flat. Okay. What about Beverly Hills Burger King, however? Well, probably, to be honest with you, probably privileged teenagers, probably getting dropped off every day in their butler's limousines or something. I'm exaggerating, of course, but probably fairly privileged teenagers, high school kids or whatever. And they're probably being forced to work there because their parents are trying to instill some sort of ethics, some sort of work ethic into their rich little son or daughter. And so if you lowered their pay, because they're not working at that Burger King for the money, if you lowered their pay, they probably wouldn't quit. Why? Because it's a job and their parents are making them work there anyway. Their allowance probably far exceeds any money they could make working at the Burger King. On the other hand, if you increase their pay, well, they're probably not going to work any harder because, frankly, they don't need the job anyway. Really, I mean, so doesn't fit into their family activity. So they're going to be relatively insensitive to a change in their wage rate at this Burger King. In other words, their labor supply curve is likely to be relatively steep. What about labor demand? Well, in Greensboro, North Carolina, the demand for labor, of course, is going to be characterized by whatever the manager of that Burger King chooses to hire, the quantity demanded of labor at a particular wage rate. Now at the Greensboro Burger King, what does that mean? Well, if you raise the wage of an individual or the workforce at the Greensboro Burger King, the question is, can the manager pass that increase off to his customers? If he can, he's not going to be very responsive to a change in the wage rate. If he can pass all that cost off to his customers, so he could raise the wages of his employees and pass it all off to his customers in the form of higher prices. And if he doesn't, if he still sells the same amount of product, well, then he's going to keep employed the same amount of people. But in Greensboro, which is relatively is not a wealthy community, that's not likely to happen. You increase the price of a Whopper in Greensboro by 25%, say from $4 to $5 a Whopper, you're going to see a substantial fall in your Whopper sales. Meaning that if you raise the wage, this manager's probably going to have to lay some people off and or work them shorter hours. Okay, so they're going to have a relatively flat labor demand curve at the Greensboro Burger King. Okay, you raise the wage, quantity demanded of labor falls substantially. Okay. On the other hand, Beverly Hills Burger King, if they're charging $4 for a Whopper and they increase the price to $5, well, Britney Spears isn't going to buy any fewer Whoppers. Okay, she's going to buy the same amounts before. Why? Because this manager, regardless of the wage, can pass much of that cost on to their customer base and not lose that much in sales. So they're going to be relatively insensitive to a change in the wage rate. Okay, with their demand for labor. You can already see what's going on. Let's assume that the market clearing no skilled wage is at W star, and let's assume it's the same in both markets. Well, if you impose a minimum wage, say a federally mandated minimum wage, your negative effect on unemployment is going to be far less in a relatively wealthy community than it will be in a relatively poor community. And it's interesting because most of the people who talk about substantial minimum wages that have had no negative effect on employment in communities where substantial minimum wages have been put in place, they're typically not doing studies of Greensboro, North Carolina like places. Okay, they're doing studies in places like Beverly Hills, Seattle, Washington, Boston, Massachusetts, Los Angeles, just to name a few. Okay, these are all places where the median house price is probably $500,000, if not more. In other words, people are far wealthier in these communities. They can absorb an increase in the price of the product far easier than somebody in Greensboro, North Carolina, where the median house price is about $120,000 a year, and the community is not as wealthy. So this is why you see a lot of people who advocate for increasing the minimum wage. They're missing the point. A federally mandated minimum wage is not a one-size-fits-all one-size-fits-all outcome. It's going to have a far more negative impact on the no-skilled labor market in poorer communities than it will in wealthier ones.